Hi, I'm Ryan. Today I'm going to take this pile of leftover wood from a couple of previous projects and turn it into a pretty cool inlaid cutting board. Watch along as I work through the Vectric software and teach myself a thing or two. Hope you enjoy. The milling of the wood for this project wasn't too bad. Most of the stuff had been jointed or, used previously as part of projects. You can see here, these are the cutoffs from the slide on the bunk bed I just did. Just need a quick pass through the jointer here just to clean up this edge. Everything needed to go through the planer because the thicknesses were all over the map. But yeah, just kind of ran everything through the jointer, ran it all through the planer to get it to the appropriate thickness, and that was that. I decided that it would probably make a lot of sense to just chop off these rounded edges here to give myself a good surface to clamp on, and that's not going to be needed. It's just pure waste at this point. So I just set up the table saw to kind of maximize the amount of thickness I'd get, or I guess the amount of width I'd get. I ran everything through the table saw to chop off the curves and get ready for my glue up. With that all ready, I just gave everything a quick little test fit here to make sure that the glue joints were good, and I was happy with everything on both the walnut and on the maple, and yeah, it looks good. Confirm that the walnut size there fits where I want it to for the inlay, and yep, everything is good. I just used my parallel clamps here to glue this up, and I glued up the maple and the walnut together so I could just have one stack of clamps because it's not super big. One thing I've said in a bunch of past videos is if you're going to use parallel clamps or any kind of clamp where the material rests on the bar of the clamp, use tape. Just save yourself a world of headache. Tape the bars on your clamps, even though it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to get the tape to stick and get the tape straight. Just go through it, get it done. It will save you a ton of effort in the future. I'll put a link to this green frog tape that I keep raving about. I have had no end of problems with cheap, crappy masking tape, and this stuff is just amazing. I either buy it from Amazon or Home Depot or whatever. Works great, sticks well, doesn't really bleed through. So yeah, just buy this tape, move on with your life. And that's basically it for the condensed version of how to build a cutting board. I have a longer video where I go into a lot more detail on how I kind of from start to finish with fresh raw wood make cutting boards. I'll leave a link in the description at the end of this video, so check that out if you want a bit more, but this is just the quick and dirty version of getting the slab of wood here glued up so that we can move on with the process. With that done, I will let these dry for a few hours, ideally overnight, but I think maybe 3 hours will be good for me, and we'll get on with things. And with that all clamped up and the glue drying, it's time to hop over to the computer and get our toolpaths set up. Okay, so the first thing we need to do here is to create a new file and then import our bitmap. So for this, I know the cutting board is going to be about 12 inches by about 10 inches, we'll say for now, and about 1.5 inches thick. I can come back and edit these settings in the future, but we'll just use this for now. The zero position, I always do it off the material surface, and then the XY datum is kind of where it starts cutting. I've always just done it at the bottom left there. Hit OK. So this page now, this sheet or whatever it's called, is our initial cutting board, so the full size here of the board. I don't like these dimensions. I'm going to change it as we kind of work through the material, but this will be good enough for now. So the first thing we want to do now is to import our bitmap. So you click on that button there. We'll just navigate up to the folder here. Okay, what I ended up doing is I searched around and found a bunch of different pictures on the internet, and then kind of thought, maybe that's not the best way to do it. So I just asked ChatGPT, or I think in this context, Gemini, Google's Gemini, to generate an image with some mountains and a bear inlaid, and it came up with this after a couple of attempts, and I thought this was pretty good. So you import the image here, and you can see that is on the screen, and now we need to convert this into a vector. So you hit the trace bitmap button here. We know that this is black and white. I just leave the settings as default. I'm gonna hit preview. That looks pretty good to me. And we'll hit apply and close. Bob's your uncle. Now we have our vector, so we can turn off that. Okay, so there's our image centered on the board exactly as we want it. So the next thing we do here is I'm just going to click on the toolpaths button here, and I like to keep this pinned. And then we're going to hit VCarve Inlay Toolpath. I'm going to set my pocket depth to 0.5 of an inch. I'm not going to lie, I don't really know what these settings mean. I think the default when I was playing around with this was 1/4 of an inch. I thought maybe given the depth of the board, a little bit deeper was better. So I decided to go 1/2 inch with this one. The tool I want here is my 30° 1/8 inch shank V-bit. Clearance tool, we're going to use a 1/8 inch downcut end mill. This is just to hog out the bigger chunks of material. Just makes the whole thing a little bit faster. Plug destination. So what this does, when it creates the cut pattern for this pocket, it'll create the mirror image of the plug, and you can create that on the same sheet. You can create it on a new sheet. So I'm going to create it on a new sheet, and it looks like I forgot to do that. So bear with me here. We'll go sheet 1, add a new sheet. Sheet 1 here we'll rename to pocket. Sheet 2 here we will rename to plug. We're done. So we'll back up to pocket here. Go back into the V-carve inlay. Everything is still the same. Plug destination goes to sheet 2. Should have renamed to plug. Vector offsets. So this is what the boundary of the plug area is. So it'll basically clear out an area 1/4 of an inch, because that's what we have it set to, around the shape of the kind of the outside of the shape. And then you'll see in a bit here, we'll go through and we'll cut that out to create the actual plug piece. That's it. Calculate. Oops. No vector selected. We'll click on our bear. We'll hit calculate, and there is the plug and the pocket. Insufficient glue gap. I've played around with this about 9,000 times. I've gotten this error message every time, no matter what I do. I don't think it matters. I've seen a lot of people walk through these tutorials and they also get this, so we're just going to hit OK. If you know what that means, please do let me know, but I'm not too sure. So anyways, there you go. We have now our pockets, our tool paths are set up. So we'll just slow this down a little bit, and we'll go for 2 tool paths here. So here's our V-carve inlay. That's the clearing one. And then our V-carve inlay number 1. This is with the V-bit. This one takes a bit more time, obviously. And there we go. So you can just kind of wheel around here. You can see it cut that pocket just like it was supposed to. So let's switch to the... Okay, so we're on the plug page. Let's preview all tool paths. So it cuts the pocket. You can see it creates that kind of profile around the outside of the bear. Cuts the details of the bear, hogs out the material, cleans it up. Does its thing. And that, my friends, is it. Here's the plug. It's as simple as that in V-carve to create the V-carve inlays. So I'm not gonna lie, I started out using Fusion for this, for kind of CNC stuff. Bought a Vortex rotary axis for my CNC, and that was kind of the tipping point that made me look at the Vectric software, and I've had it for a bit here, and it's fantastic. It's super easy. It's way more intuitive. Anyways, I won't rant on about that, but now that we've got that done, we've sampled all of the tool paths here. You just click on this Save Toolpath button. We want to save all visible tool paths, so we'll just click on both of these guys. Our machine is a long mill. You have your post-processor and stuff set up here. Click on Save Tool Paths, and it will create 2 different tool paths for each of the plug and the pocket, because they have to use different tools. So you cut one, change a tool, cut the other. Hit save tool paths. I'm not going to save this because I've already got them saved here, but that is it. You save those and run them on your CNC. So as promised, I waited around 3 hours to take the wood out of the clamps here. I know they say 24 hours, but in my experience, you can get going a lot sooner than that, especially if you're careful and it's not a stressed joint. Like, these are pretty straightforward joints, and there's tons of glue surface, and I'm not beating on it, so I know it's going to be just fine. You can see here that tape is a little bit sticky, a little bit stuck inside the bar, but honestly it takes like 5 seconds to pull it out, and that's that. No mess, no fuss, no muss. One huge benefit here of only waiting a few hours is the glue on the outside isn't completely hard. It's pretty easy to scrape off, so yeah, it's just nice to be able to pop them out of the clamps and clean off any squeeze out without too much struggle. I know that the outside edges of this block here are square and straight, so I just use my TSO track square here with a track saw track and just square up the bottom edge. Then I have 2 edges that I can use to reference off the table saw fence to get this down to the right size. Next up, it's just a quick pass through the table saw here. I know this is technically cross-cutting and I should probably be using a sled or, a miter gauge or something, but I went slow, I went careful, and it's big enough and flat enough that I think I'm fine, and obviously it was fine. So yeah, your mileage may vary, but I don't have a problem pushing something like this through kind of in an awkward-y sort of cross-cut. I make 2 more quick cuts on the table saw here just to keep the profile of the boards fairly similar. I don't want one tiny little skinny slab just on the side, so I take an even amount off of both sides here just to get it down to the size I want, and with that we have what's starting to look like a cutting board. The walnut that I glued up for the plug doesn't have a square edge, so I need to pass this quickly through the jointer here just to square it up so I can use that as a reference. This one felt a wee bit squirrely trying to cross-cut through the table saw, so I just hopped over to the miter saw and cut it to length. I could have used a sled, but you know, that's what the miter saw is for. It's pretty good at cross-cutting, even if it's not my favorite tool. One of the things I'm struggling with overall in my shop is where to put my CNC. I'm about to order the 48-inch expansion kit for it so I can push bigger sheets through, and I think technically there would be room on the wall, but then I lose the ability to tile full-size 4x8 sheets through, and honestly, clamping and stuff is just a pain. My computer lives on the opposite side of the shop, and so I'm always kind of contorting myself here to try to get things lined up. If you have any ideas on what to do with a big CNC and big table saw and a big assembly table and a very small shop, please let me know in the comments below. After zeroing out everything and getting the G-code loaded up into G-Sender, it was time to begin the cut of the pocket. I didn't bother cleaning the glue off here because I figured, you know, I'm going to have to sand and plane and everything once the plug's glued in, and I don't think that caused me any problems. So here we see it's cut in the pocket. For the pocket side, I did the V-carve first with the V-bit and then the clearing bit cut after. You might recognize here that this dust boot that I'm using is a little bit mangled, and you know, it's been a bit of a source of frustration. It's fallen off a few times. One time it fell off and got caught up in the cutter and wholly mangled it, so I thought I'd try to use it here, but it's not really doing much, and you'll see in a few seconds here it falls off. And a quick pit stop here to change bits to do the clearing with the 1/8 inch end mill. So just finishing up here with the clearing cut, and this is about done. Overall it took about 45 minutes to cut the pocket, and now it's time to move on and repeat the process with the plug. For the plug, I did the clearing cut with the end mill first. I'll be honest, I can't notice any discernible difference between the two. I've heard you can get kind of more tarot if you use the end mill first, so some people recommend to use the V-bit first, but yeah, no difference from what I can tell. There were some fuzzies left in the bottom of the pocket, so I just scraped them loose with a chisel here. I didn't really have to like carve or do anything. It was just a matter of scraping it loose and vacuuming it up to clear out the pocket. I used my bandsaw to cut the plug out of the block of walnut here. I have a 1/2 inch bit in it, so it was a little tight getting around some of the corners, but I just cut some relief cuts and went slow, and it cut it right out. With that done, it was time for the moment of truth. Time to do a test dry fit here. So I put it in and it fit, and there's a little bit of wibble. I wasn't sure kind of if that's good or bad, but you know, it fit in. It just kind of plopped right in. I guess I would have expected it to maybe be a little bit more snug, but I guess that's what the room for the glue is. And speaking of glue, I think I went a little overboard here, but I just squirted some glue kind of all around and stole a paintbrush here from my kids' art supplies, which seemed to work pretty good. But yeah, I just coated the whole thing with glue and I brushed it all around and then grabbed a paper towel and just kind of scooped some of it out and tried to make it as smooth and as evenly glued as possible. When I pushed the plug in here with all the glue in, it was definitely a snugger fit, so I figured that must be the way it is. So I just, gave it a good shove here. And then I grabbed about as many clamps as I could find. I know that you're supposed to apply lots of clamping pressure, lots of even pressure across, so I only have one clamp that would actually reach. So I just grabbed a bunch of cauls, some scrap pieces of hardwood here, and put them across, and just got as many clamps onto this as possible. There's a lot of clamps in a little space, but hopefully that'll do the trick. I let this dry overnight just to be safe, and well, because, you know, it was bedtime and stuff. So yeah, anyways, this glue dried overnight and just pulled all the clamps off, and I had kind of hummed and hawed about the best way to remove this large block. I thought maybe I'd push it through the planer, but I didn't think that would work because there's not enough to grab onto, and yeah, I just wasn't too sure about that and wanted to avoid some chip out. So anyways, I just set up the bandsaw and cut the bulk of it off. It left maybe a 1/4 inch or so there to deal with. With that off, I decided that probably the planer was the best way. I took really light passes here, like a less than a 1/4 of a turn, just to get rid of the top part of the walnut there. And as soon as I was seeing some maple under there, I stopped and moved over to the sander. Okay, with the scrap of the plug out of the way, you can see a couple problems here. There's a couple parts in the bear's midsection there, and some outlines around the trees that don't look like they quite filled in. I'm guessing that the parts in the middle just broke off because they were really tiny. So I decided the best thing to do here is just to mix up some quick 5-minute epoxy with some black dye and just fill those holes with epoxy. It's not perfect, but I think it looks pretty good still, and we'll see how it turns out at the end. I like to put a really heavy chamfer on the bottom of all my boards just to give you somewhere to get your fingers under to pick it up, and I like the way it looks. It kind of creates like a little bit of a floating shadow line effect there, and I just like it, so it's something I've always done. It's important to know that the chamfer goes on the bottom. Sometimes I see my boards used the other way, but you know, to each their own. This one will be pretty obvious because of that large bear inlaid. Next up, I sand all sides through 150 grit, which is usually where I stop for a cutting board, but yeah, just do 80, 120, and 150 to get it nice and smooth and ready for finish. With the sanding all done and the epoxy all cured and everything ready to go, I give the board a wipe down with some orange mineral spirits. Now I'm pretty confident this is going to break the internet here, but I don't usually water pot my boards. I don't notice any difference. I don't notice any difference over regular use, initial use. I just don't get any feathering, any whatever. I'm sorry, I just usually don't do it. But that aside, I give it a wipe off here with this orange mineral spirits just to get all the dust off. And I let that dry for a little bit, and it's time to put some of this awesome Clapham's wax on to finish it up. I buy this wax from Lee Valley. It's a mix of mineral oil and beeswax. It smells good, it's all natural. It's their salad bowl finish, but I always use this on my cutting boards. I usually put on a couple of coats, maybe 3, let it sit for a while depending on when I need to have the board done. If I can't get enough coats on in time, I just let the person know that they might have to put a new coat on. I find this stuff works well, holds up pretty good. Just reapply it every month or so, and that is that. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this first foray into inlaid cutting boards. Please give me a like, subscribe, check out these other 2 videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, and have a great day.